Here is a fact so straightforward it almost sounds made up. A monthly supply of Humira, one of the best-selling drugs in American history, used by millions for arthritis and autoimmune conditions, costs approximately $6,900 in the United States. In Germany, the same drug, made by the same company, approved by the same clinical trials, costs around $1,300. In the United Kingdom, it's closer to $1,100. In Japan, under $700. Same molecule, same factory, same patent. 4 completely different prices depending on which side of an invisible line you happen to be standing on when your doctor hands you a prescription. And the gap isn't a rounding error. It isn't explained by shipping costs or regulatory differences or the unique challenges of the American market. The gap is a policy choice, a deliberate, lobbied for, legislated, and meticulously maintained policy choice that transfers hundreds of billions of dollars every year from American patients and their insurers to a supply chain so convoluted that even the people working inside it can't always tell you where the money goes. I'm talking about pharmaceutical pricing in America, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why it works the way it does, who benefits from it, and why the people positioned to fix it have spent decades choosing not to. Here's the thing. The standard defense of American drug prices is R&D. The argument goes like this. Developing a new drug costs, on average, $2 billion or more. Clinical trials take 10 to 15 years. Most drugs fail. The few that succeed have to recoup the cost of all the failures. American patients pay more because American prices fund the global innovation pipeline. Europe free rides on American risk capital. And without high U.S. prices, pharmaceutical companies couldn't afford to develop the next generation of drugs. This argument is not entirely wrong. Drug development is genuinely expensive and genuinely risky. But it is also one of the most selectively applied, strategically deployed half-truths in the history of corporate lobbying. Because here's what the R&D argument conveniently omits. First, a significant portion of foundational drug research is funded by the federal government through the National Institutes of Health. The NIH spends roughly $45 billion per year on biomedical research. A 2018 study found that every single one of the 210 drugs approved by the FDA between 2010 and 2016 had received NIH funding at some stage of development. Every single one. The public funds the basic science. The company funds the later stage trials, patents the result, and then prices the output at whatever the market, or rather, the deliberately unregulated American non-market, will bear. Second, the pharmaceutical industry consistently spends more on marketing and share buybacks than on R&D. In a typical year, the largest pharmaceutical companies collectively spend more buying back their own stock, which enriches shareholders and executives, than they invest in research. This is not a secret. It is in their annual reports. The R&D argument is real enough to be useful and incomplete enough to be misleading, which makes it the perfect corporate talking point. Now let's get into the actual mechanism. Because the price of a drug in America is not set by supply and demand. It is not set by production cost. It is not set by a government negotiation. It is set by the manufacturer at whatever number the manufacturer decides, and then pass through a supply chain of middlemen, each taking a cut. in a system where almost no one, not the patient, not the doctor, not even most insurers, ever sees the real price until after the transaction is complete. Meet the Pharmacy Benefit Manager, or PBM. If you've never heard of this entity, that is by design because PBMs are the most powerful actors in pharmaceutical pricing that almost nobody outside the industry can name. PBMs are third-party companies. The three largest are CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx, which together manage pharmacy benefits for roughly 270 million Americans. They negotiate drug prices between manufacturers and insurers. They decide which drugs appear on your insurance formulary. They negotiate rebates from manufacturers in exchange for favorable placement. And they keep a portion of those rebates as their revenue. Here's the structural problem. The rebate system creates an incentive for PBMs to favor drugs with higher list prices, because a higher list price means a larger rebate in absolute dollar terms, which means more revenue for the PBM. So the system that was ostensibly designed to lower drug costs has a built-in preference for higher-priced drugs. The PBM negotiates a 40% rebate on a $100 drug and pockets part of it, or it negotiates a 40% rebate on a $6,000 drug. The math on which one generates more revenue is not complicated. And here's where it links to the patient. The rebates negotiated by PBMs often don't flow back to the patient at the pharmacy counter. They flow to the insurer or the PBM itself. So your out-of-pocket cost, your copay or deductible, is frequently calculated off the full list price of the drug, not the net price after rebates, meaning you are paying a percentage of an inflated number that the system itself has already discounted behind closed doors. You're paying the retail markup on a product your insurer already bought wholesale. Now let's talk about the patent system, because this is where pharmaceutical pricing gets creative in ways that should be studied in business schools as cautionary tales, and are instead apparently just Tuesday. A pharmaceutical patent lasts 20 years from the date of filing. After expiration, generic manufacturers can produce the drug at a fraction of the cost, which is why generics typically sell for 80 to 90% less than brand name equivalents. Generic competition is the most effective drug price reduction mechanism that exists. So the pharmaceutical industry has spent decades developing strategies to delay it. The most well-documented is called Evergreening. A company takes an existing drug approaching patent expiration, makes a minor modification, a different dosage formulation, a different coating, a different delivery mechanism, files a new patent on the modified version, aggressively markets the new version as an improvement, and effectively extends its pricing power by another 10 to 20 years. The underlying molecule is the same. The therapeutic effect is largely the same. The patent is new, and the clock resets. There's also the practice called pay for delay. A brand name manufacturer facing a generic competitor preparing to enter the market pays the generic company, often hundreds of millions of dollars, to delay launching their cheaper product. The brand name company pays a competitor to stay out of the market. This practice was challenged legally and exists in a regulatory gray area that has never been comprehensively closed. The FTC estimated that pay-for-delay agreements cost American consumers over $3 billion per year in higher drug prices. That estimate is almost certainly conservative. The historical rhyme here reaches back further than most people expect. In the early 1900s, Standard Oil controlled the American oil market through a combination of vertical integration, predatory pricing, and legislative capture so complete that it took a Supreme Court decision and the dissolution of the company into 34 separate entities to break it. The logic was simple. Control the infrastructure, control the pricing, eliminate competition, capture the regulator. A century later, 3 PBMs control the pharmacy benefits of 270 million Americans. 6 companies control the majority of the global pharmaceutical market, and the industry spent $375 million on federal lobbying in a single recent year. More than the defense industry, more than the oil industry, more than any other sector. The infrastructure is different, the logic is identical, and then there is the Medicare Part D provision. In 2003, Congress passed legislation creating a prescription drug benefit for Medicare recipients, a significant achievement for patient access. But buried inside the legislation was a clause that explicitly prohibited Medicare, the largest drug purchaser in the country, representing roughly 150 million Americans, from negotiating drug prices directly with manufacturers. The Veterans Administration, which does negotiate, pays roughly 40% less for the same drugs. The Department of Defense negotiates and pays less. Every other developed country's government negotiates and pays less. Medicare was specifically, deliberately, legally prohibited from doing the same thing. That provision was lobbied into existence, and it remained in place for nearly 20 years, until partial reforms in 2022 allowed negotiation on a narrow list of drugs. Partial, narrow, after 20 years. So what can you actually do when you're the person standing at a pharmacy counter being handed a bill? Ask your doctor for the generic version every single time one exists. Generic drugs are required to be bioequivalent to brand name drugs. They are not inferior products. They are the same molecule at a fraction of the price. Use GoodRx, cost plus drugs, or similar cash pay platforms for common medications before running them through insurance. For many generic drugs, the cash price at discount platforms is lower than your insurance copay. This is not widely advertised by anyone with a financial interest in you using your insurance. If you're prescribed a brand name drug with no generic, ask your doctor whether a therapeutically equivalent drug in the same class has a generic. Most drug classes have multiple options. Substituting within a class is often clinically appropriate and can cut costs by 70 to 90%. For expensive chronic condition drugs, check whether the manufacturer offers a patient assistance program. Most large pharmaceutical companies offer them. They exist partly out of genuine concern, and partly because a patient on the drug at zero cost is better for long-term market share than a patient who can't afford it and switches to a competitor. Understand that your insurance formulary is not a medical document. It is a commercial negotiation. A drug not covered by your plan is not necessarily medically inferior. It may simply have lost a rebate negotiation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. American pharmaceutical prices are not high because America has better drugs. They are not high because American patients get faster access to innovation, though that is sometimes true at the margins. They are high because America is the only developed country that decided at a legislative level that the government should not negotiate drug prices. that market competition in pharmaceuticals should be legally defeatable through patent strategy, and that the entities sitting between manufacturers and patients should be allowed to operate with minimal transparency and maximum financial leverage. Every one of those decisions was lobbied into existence by an industry that spent $375 million in a single year making sure the people writing the laws understood where their next campaign contribution was coming from. The drug is not expensive because it's hard to make. It's expensive because the system surrounding it was designed to make the price impossible to challenge. So drop your take in the comments. Do you think pharmaceutical pricing in America is A, a necessary feature of a system that produces the world's most innovative drugs and just needs better transparency? B, a fixable problem that requires Medicare negotiation, patent reform, and PBM regulation working together? Or C, a fully captured regulatory environment where the financial incentives are so deeply embedded that meaningful reform will take a generation and a crisis to force? Because somewhere right now, someone is cutting their pills in half. And the company that made those pills reported record earnings last quarter.